All right, everybody, welcome. Today, Planet is hosting one of our Planet Perspectives webcasts, and the topic today is about the future of SharePoint. So we are so super excited that you guys were able to take some time out of your schedule and join us today. So we're going to do a quick introduction of our panel. Starting off, I'll go ahead and I'm Jennifer Mason. I'm the Director of Innovation and Strategic Solutions here at Planet, which is a super fun role. I get to work with our consultants, our customers, find out what products and what tools are really impacting the way that they work, and be able to bring that out to Planet as different offerings. So I love my time here at Planet, love the team that I get to work with, and I'm so super stoked about the team that we have on the call today. So we're going to go around. We're going to start with Cathy, and why don't you give us just a quick introduction, overview to who you are and what you do at Planet.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jennifer. I'm Cathy Du. I'm an Enterprise Delivery Manager here at Planet, focused on making sure that the services we deliver to our customers are exceptional, as always, and that the team has the right support to fulfill the promises that we make. So doing that lately around a lot of Office 365 and still a lot of SharePoint and SharePoint specialists, and do a lot of focus on user experience around SharePoint.
Awesome. How about you, Patrick?
Hi, I'm Patrick Curran. I'm the Director for our Federal Group over here at Planet Technologies. Responsible for implementation. So all the staff that goes off and does all the excellent implementations like Cathy was saying. On the federal side, it's kind of my responsibility. I still get out there and implement SharePoint in different federal agencies and kind of help keep them up and running.
Awesome. How about you, Mark?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Mark here, Technical Practice Manager. Our team focuses on SharePoint and Azure technologies on the state and local government education side. I have the wonderful opportunity daily to work with a great group of guys who are going out implementing on-premise and Office 365 implementations, and we also have a great group of developers who are working with forms and workflows and Azure applications daily as well. So, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but not least, our newest, at least on this webinar, our newest Planet employee. Tanya, why don't you go ahead and give us a quick introduction to who you are in your role at Planet.
Sure. So I'm Planet's Evolve 365 Trusted Advisor. Evolve 365 is our help desk as a service for SharePoint and Office 365. And it provides on-demand training video. We also have the option to offer live support. So a big part of my role is helping our customers make sure that they're getting the continued value from their investment with Evolve 365. So that includes onboarding, working with them to do some planning around their launch configurations, continuing to provide them some information on how their users are using the product, and maybe some gaps that we can fill by coming on-site to do training. They're loving my time at Planet and the people that I get to work with, and really enjoying working with my customers.
Awesome. Well, as you can see, we've got a well-rounded group of folks from all of our different divisions within Planet. You've definitely got a team of people that eat, breathe, and live SharePoint. So most of us are always thinking about it, even when we're not supposed to be thinking about it. We're still thinking about it. So this week has been a very big week in our world. And so we want to share kind of our perspective from the announcements that came out. And so the agenda today, we're going to share some quick links with you guys of some of the content that we're going to be talking about. And so I'll share some links to where you can go ahead and get that information off the web and watch some of those videos that we're referencing. And then we're going to kind of do round robin, talk about, hey, in this area, what are some of the questions? What are the things that we're thinking? What are the announcements that we need to be paying attention to? And so we invite anyone that is in the audience to please use the chat window to send us over the questions window and go to meeting. Use that to send us over any questions that you might have, and we'll get that looped in as we're going through and kind of sharing just our perspective of what the announcements this week meant for us. So getting things started, here on the screen you've got a link to all of the videos that were created, and so they did a really great job. I had the amazing opportunity to attend the event live, And so that was a very, very unique experience. I'm so thankful that I got to go. We got to go with a couple of our customers actually attend. There were about 130 people in the audience. And so it kicked off, and then we watched the webinar with you guys, and we watched it live while the webinar was recorded. And then from there, we broke out and had different sessions where we could go and talk with the engineers. And so Microsoft did not want to make that information only available to the 130 of us that got to attend. So prior to the event, they recorded a subset of videos. They're all about 18 to 20 minutes that dig deeper into the features that were highlighted in the keynote. And so this screen that we have right here, and something that we can give you access to post-webinar, has all of the links to the different videos that were created. So if you want to dive deeper into it and hear directly from Microsoft, these links will help you get access to that information. It was definitely a fun event. It was just small and intimate. You got to see all of the different demos. Seeing it live is it's always fun to see how the sausage is made and see what's actually going on behind the webinar. I'm sure the webinar made it seem like we were in a nice big location, but in reality, just a couple of us in some small chairs. But a very, very exciting event. So thankful that we got to attend. The rest of my panel didn't get to attend, but did watch it live. And so they saw some of the information that was being displayed, and that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. So the first question that I'm going to pose to everybody, and we definitely won't go to everyone in the panel for every question that we have today because, well, that would be boring. So we're not going to do that, but we are for this one. And I just want to ask, from the event or from the big announcements that have come out from the future of SharePoint, from your perspective, what are the biggest takeaways from the event? And so I am going to put Tanya on the spot and start with her first.
The one thing that really made me go finally and kind of typed my notes in all caps was that the site style is now going to be labeled SharePoint instead of site. It's such a small thing, but to me it really kind of set the tone that they are acknowledging that SharePoint is definitely in use. Yeah, I think one of the stats they gave out that 9 out of 10 intranets are using SharePoint. So that, it just set the tone. I mean, it's been called Site for so long, and to actually name it SharePoint was just a really, really big indicator. It made the most sense, and to see it finally happening was just one of those, like, thank goodness they're really getting serious about SharePoint after all these years. So that was the one that I keep coming back to. Very, very small change. Not really changing content, not really putting in a new feature, but it was just a big indicator for me that they were acknowledging, SharePoint is here and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that was a question for so many people. I think I remember the number of blogs that have come out in the last 2 years of, is SharePoint dead? And what's happening with it? And I think that the number one takeaway from this week's announcements are SharePoint's not dead, it's alive and kicking, and a lot of innovation is happening in that area. And they're really behind it, and things are changing. And so that's an awesome takeaway. How about you, Cathy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big one, just clearing up the confusion to people that SharePoint isn't going anywhere. Always great to see that happening. But for me, I think one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in the past, and I know a lot of my customers have, is truly making SharePoint mobile. And so having the SharePoint app released as well as the responsive framework put into team sites is something that's really exciting for me to see them innovating in that way. I know I've been begging for that since the 2007 version of SharePoint, and so I'm really excited to see that happen and to see the continued innovation that will continue to happen around that mobile apps and making it responsive, because that's one of the first things they think about now as they go through everything.
I love the mobile app. So I've been in a group where they gave us beta rights to the mobile app, and I installed it, and I thought in my head, okay, I'm going to test this, and I'm going to, do whatever. I'm going to give them feedback, and then I'm not going to think about it again. Turns out quite the opposite. I actually now use the app on a day-to-day basis. It's connected to our Office 365 tenant, and it is one of the most powerful tools. And so on a daily basis, I'm actually using my phone to get SharePoint content quickly and easily. And so for someone who's been working in SharePoint since you know, the early days of SharePoint 2001, I never would have dreamed that you could do that. And so I'm so excited. A couple of notes about the app, which I just think is great, is it supports on-prem and Office 365. And so that is a very big thing for a lot of people. It also supports SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013 on-prem. And it works across a hybrid environment. And so I'm super excited that this is one of the things that they didn't come out and say we're only going to do Office 365 first and we're going to follow with on-prem after. And so that's super, super exciting. I think the announcements were that this quarter we should start to see the mobile app roll out to iOS, followed by Android and Windows Phone by the end of the year. So all super, super, super exciting things. I love it. You guys can tell how excited I get as I start talking about this. I can't continue.
Popped up in the O365 admin console yesterday as being something that was coming in.
Yes, I'm so excited. All right, Mark, how about you? What are your thoughts on what was the most impactful? And it's okay to echo on to the things that people said, but what are you most excited about after the future of SharePoint?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I have to thank Cathy for giving us mobile use, and she's been taking since 2007. For that. For me, I think the biggest takeaway really was the promise of Powerhouse and Flow. So many excellent things that we saw during that cast, and you know, as far as the new experiences that I think we'll talk about here in a little bit, one way or another, customers are going to get indoctrinated with that, you know, and they're going to love it. As far as the new app model stuff, which I think we'll also touch base on, that was as a developer for 25 years now. You know, it's easy for me to get kind of excited about that promise that you know, these paradigms provide. However, you know, as I start to think about what have customers really struggled with over the past 2 or 3 years as SharePoint 2013 has come and become more ubiquitous as folks have moved to the cloud, is really around how do we enable our power users to better develop forms and workflows. Yeah. And InfoPath, you know, has provided a lot of value to a lot of customers over the years, and so I don't want to diminish that. I think that the promise of, you know, what's Microsoft's replacement for that going to be? How are we going to you know, best leverage tools? How are we going to remove dependencies from SharePoint Designer and things like that? Are starting to become realized with Power Apps and Flow, and I think that we're going to see a huge evolution of those products as we move forward, and customers are really going to get the benefit of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I am excited to see some of those things as well. I think it's interesting to see Flow and Power Apps and what's coming in InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. I was happy to see some movement in the right direction. Maybe not some, you know, aligning, hey, this is the final stance, but definitely some movement in that direction. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that a little bit later in the presentation. So Patrick, how about you? What are your thoughts on the future of SharePoint announcements and what is next?
The thing that really, I think, is going to start being utilized the most, or at least by the large organizations, and, for example, the federal government or state and local governments, or even larger corporations, is really going to be the compliance and reporting side of things. You know, records management, data protection, data monitoring. Those are the things that I've been pretty happy with. The analytics side of things, right? So that's I think is pretty much going to be the next really cool tool for me in the group side.
Yeah, there's a lot coming with that. I'm excited to start to see some of that come to play. I think for me, sharing what my most exciting thing about all of this was, I feel like there's a couple of times where I felt like I just wanted to scream, finally, you finally did this. Has to do around the new modern experiences. And so the new team sites homepage, the concept that a group is a team, is a group is a team, and so we don't have to make this decision now of do I use a group or do I use a team site, and so that's coming soon. That is super exciting to me. And then just the new, fresh UI for working with content, to be able to, wait for it, change the metadata without going to the ellipse, going to the edit properties, making a change and clicking save. I can just do it right on that screen. And so I think that some of that stuff that's showing up now, and the ability, the other one I loved, the ability to take a OneDrive file that I'm working on personally in OneDrive and say, ooh, this should go to a team, and say, send to SharePoint team, and it works, and it can go to a SharePoint site. And so I really feel like they've captured onto the natural behaviors of users anyway, and so it is super exciting for me to see, okay, we actually have some of these features now that can support the way we typically work anyway, and it's out of the box and doesn't take any development or any changes. So I'm super excited about the modern aspects of it. So I think we pretty much hit on all of the pieces. You've got the new modern list and library. You have got a new development model. You've got some changes for how branding and stuff like that will happen, and Cathy's going to dig into that a little bit later. One thing that we didn't hit on in our summary was the changes that they're making to SharePoint 2016 on-prem. And so what's going on in that is they have officially announced what a lot of us thought was going to happen anyway. They have officially announced that there will be feature packs. So once you are on SharePoint 2016, if you have software assurance, you're going to be able to get these feature packs. And what that is going to do is bring the functionality of the cloud-first development efforts down to the on-prem environment. So there's still going to be limitations of what features are cloud-only features. So groups are cloud-only features right now, and Delve and some of those other things that are cloud-only, those aren't going to come down. But you think about the new modern UI for lists and libraries, the new sites pages, all of those types of things are going to be bundled down now in features that you're going to be able to install to keep your farm up to date with some of the same features that are available inside of Office 365. And so they've always been alluding to that going to be happening, but they've never actually said it was going to happen. So they have officially come out and said that's the stance they're taking, as well as getting those feature packs out. So I think that's the other major announcement from the event. So does anyone have anything to add to that? I mean, that's just super exciting for the on-prem folks, especially Patrick for Federal, who's still got a lot of people that need to be on-prem. That's a great feature.
Well, I agree. I think they're going to work hard at trying to make the two of them as equal as possible. But like you said, they're not going to implement all the cloud-first features on premises. But that's where hybrid comes into play, right? So if you are trying to get some of the features and functionality that are cloud only, hopefully they will implement a hybrid scenario for that. For example, you brought up Delve. If you implement your cloud search service application, then you can start taking advantage of Delve with your on-premises environment, right? So going hybrid really for the large organization, even for the small ones, is probably how you're going to want to look forward.
Awesome. Okay, so we are going to move out. I'd like to just remind anybody that's in the audience, should you have any particular questions for us or anything specific you want us to address, please feel free to put that in the questions window, and then we'll pop up and we'll bring it up and talk through it as we're doing some of the different conversations. So, kind of leading into that, infrastructure changes. So, what do we want to tell people? What do we want to think about when we start thinking about what they announced for SharePoint 2016 and what's coming? What are some of the things that, from our perspective, from a Planet perspective, things that we should be thinking about if we're running on-prem? So Patrick, you kind of started us out with some of the hybrid pieces. Anybody else have something that they kind of want to share when it comes to the on-prem or the infrastructure changes that were announced this week?
Well, I can talk a little bit to that, Jen. So for me, the biggest thing with a hybrid scenario and the on-premises versus cloud is the hybrid search, and really looking towards that. That really is going to be a key way to bridge the gap for those components that are still separated versus cloud versus on-premises installation. So I think that's a huge takeaway that we should all be thinking about as we look towards the future and planning things out. and how a hybrid scenario could really work into it. And then for me, the user experience coming closer together so that we're not so completely disjointed in the UI between the two is going to be giant for our population and for the users to not feel like they have to learn two completely different navigation schemes, that things are in different places depending on which one I'm in. And to be able to make that a closer gap is going to be really big from a learning perspective for our users.
Yeah, it will really change usability when they get to that point. I mean, there's going to be a lot of, once you get on SharePoint 2016, the future is described as, these feature packs and updates can constantly be happening. And I think this is really the beginning of the change. And we've waited since Office 365 came out. I think every time they start talking to us, our final answer is, well, what about on-prem? What about on-prem? Like, it's not going away. There are still very valid reasons for why you would use on-prem versus Office 365. And so I think that this is starting to address some of those pieces. And, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how that goes. And so I know a lot of people that were in the audience that were on-prem are super excited about the changes that are coming from that perspective.
And I think it's just equally as important, like Cathy mentioned, that the user experience is going to be consistent once everyone's in 2016 or Office 365 with the release of these apps. Now, obviously, that's user experience, but we know that they had to put a lot of work in behind the scenes to make sure that those things happen. It was really reminiscent for me when they announced Windows 10 at Ignite last year, how they showed that across devices, whether it's a mobile device, a tablet, a laptop, or a desktop, you're going to have the same experience. They wanted to have the same code base, the same look and feel, the same sort of action. And that's what I got from it. And I know that that took an incredible amount of work behind the scenes. So I'm glad that they're really showing that they're investing in all this infrastructure behind SharePoint.
Yeah, definitely. It's so super exciting. So moving on from the infrastructure, again, if anybody in the audience has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat window. But we're going to move on to the modern updates. This was such a fun section of the show. I absolutely loved it. They covered everything from the internet in your pocket to Power Apps and Flow to working with lists and libraries. And so first of all, let's start with the internet. And so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the announcements that they've made concerning an internet, and then I'm going to open it up. I know Cathy is going to have lots of information in this space to share with us and lots of perspective. But the announcements that they made is that they are putting more tools inside of SharePoint that make having a ready-to-go intranet available to you. And the way that they're doing that is through the mobile app. And so the mobile app that's going to release gives you information in your pocket. They're going to have an updated sites homepage, which is going to let you navigate into the content that is most relevant to you. It's using a lot of the features from Office Graph. I think that's the other thing that is super exciting, is we're starting to see that all of these different components are relying on the Office Graph. For those of you that may not know, may not be familiar with it, Office Graph is the engine behind Dell that provides you all of that personalized machine learning information. Who I am, who I talk to most, what do I do? So we're going to start to see that sprinkled throughout the entire experience. In addition to that, we have the modern list and library experiences as well as Power Apps and Flow. And so by putting all of this together, they're saying it's going to be easier to create an intranet type solution where we can put content out there. And finally, one of the things that I forgot to mention before is a new page design, a page canvas where you can add and edit pages quickly. They refer to it as a railed experience, meaning you can put the content in the page, but they kind of control how it's laid out and where it goes. But it was really neat when they were demoing that. I loved it. You could edit a page and you could see how you could put a power flow inside of an intranet page. And you could put Power Apps and reference in there. So lots of really cool stuff coming that way. They made some announcements about the Nielsen ratings for intranets, and 9 out of the 10 that are the top 10 intranets were created using SharePoint. So that's a pretty significant number there for the internet rating. I see Patrick making a face, so Oh, you must have something to add. Did I call it the wrong rating, didn't I? Nielsen is the TV ratings, right?
Norman Nielsen.
Okay, well, Nielsen close, but, you know, same thing. Everyone knew what I was talking about. I can tell I said it wrong when Patrick giggled. So, oops, got me there. But lots of really interesting stuff there. So now that I've kind of given the framework of it, it would be kind of fun to start with somebody other than Cathy. However, I know Cathy would probably physically explode if I did that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Cathy.
You could start with someone else. It's okay. I've waited this long to speak on it. I don't have to.
Go for it, Ron. You can lead us out.
So it's a really fun time in the world of SharePoint. For years now, and especially since Office 365 came out, one of the big things we've heard is don't customize SharePoint. Don't customize SharePoint. And with these big announcements, it's come back around to, oh, well, people really want to customize SharePoint. So they're really working to provide us with a great opportunity and platform to be able to do this in. So some of these railed page editing experiences and things like that are giving people that don't have development teams the options to really go in and customize SharePoint and create these powerful intranets. And they're still separating out intranet and team sites to a small amount right now. And that is something that in the industry standard that we see. There is that published content intranet, and then there are our team sites where we collaborate. And so they're working to bridge that gap to a small amount, but they're giving us these options to edit and to go in and do these things. And they're responsive, which is huge. So no more having to put those customizations in place on your own to make those sites responsive or to make them work with the SharePoint app that's coming out, which is all hugely exciting to see.
Mark, what do you think about all of these changes?
Well, that was a great introduction. I'm not really, I'm probably a little bit on the fringe as far as a mobile app user. Up until recently, I've only had maybe 3 or 4 apps loaded to my phone outside of what came on. So I am a huge fan of responsive web, and that's probably a reason why I have not embraced apps in the way that maybe others have, is because if a web is done well and it's easily accessible from my mobile phone, I tend to find less value in the app itself. And so even in my own web design projects that I tend to do, it's important for me to try to make it a website mobile responsive so that it will work well across devices. And we certainly have heard that from our customers as well. I think my bigger concern about the team site, the new team site experience, I am excited since the changes. I am excited to see that we're kind of now getting a first-class mobile view as part of the team site experience. But the details about how this is all going to work with the branding paradigms that we have today, as Cathy mentioned, our approach has been to avoid sort of carte blanche, updates on publishing sites where in the past, we've had, teams that have really focused specifically on making SharePoint look not like SharePoint at all. And we've certainly toned that down for the guidance of Microsoft in Office 365 through methods like JavaScript injection. And so, I think that that has proved valuable in some cases, but you still have customers who really want a different experience than what's provided. And so I'm really interested in seeing how this is going to all play out as far as, okay, I really want a customization that looks drastically different than what's offered here. I still want to take advantage of the responsive framework. How can I do that? I'm also interested in seeing how the new site provisioning model is going to work as well, because there's definitely some changes coming there. I think beyond that, the pages that were talked about a few moments ago, that for me was probably the most exciting piece of it. I've used Wix as many have, and I think Microsoft is kind of approaching a similar paradigm to that, where you can kind of sort of drag and drop. You skew the ribbon bar to have more specific context-driven items above each bar. I think that that's going to work out really well. The question again would be on the responsive side, how's that going to all fare out at the end? I think that the biggest concern I had really about that is more of, these pages essentially are going to now be living in separate page libraries, and the experience is going to be different, and the web part paradigms are going to be different. So you'll be able to use the new web parts on existing pages, but not the other way around. And so if you have groups that have spent a lot of time invested in developing web parts, or maybe ported over existing web parts that they haven't, to upgrade to core app models, how's that all going to work? I think there's still a lot of questions and concerns about that, but all in all, I'm really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, me too. It's exciting. You see all of this, and then you wonder, okay, well, what is, the proof is in the pudding. What is it actually going to be like? And so, I mean, honestly, I think we're going to experience, much like we did with groups, the pain of the MVP release. And so the MVP stands for minimal viable product, which if we look at what's happened with groups, they released an MVP version of groups, which I think 95% of the people I talked to the day it released turned it off because it didn't have the admin controls that it needed. And now here we are 6-8 months later, and you have very granular controls. You have enterprise content management on it. You have different naming things. Just today, groups announced multi-domain support. So all of these things, now I know Cathy's really excited about that, and we've chatted about that in our seminar. All of these things came out in this concept of MVP releases. And so imagine we're going to see a lot of the same things here. We're going to see minimal releases, and actually on the links that I posted on the blog post, they did a really great job of saying this is what you should expect this quarter, and this is what you should expect by the end of the calendar year. And so I think we'll continue to see kind of that ramp up and roll out, but I'm definitely interested to see. We actually saw some of the stuff has already hit in first release, a small sliver of first release, got the modern document library experience. Pretty soon we're going to start to see, in fact I imagine very soon, we're going to start to see some of the other things that maybe the new modern list experience come. And they're also doing a really good job of, even though you have the modern, you can switch back to classic. So there's some interesting perspectives and concepts there. So Tanya, I'm going to ask you now, this is another area that I know with you working with end users and really spending a lot of time getting them to use the tools and teaching and training. What do you think about all of these announcements that were provided last week?
So it's very much in line with what everybody said. I mean, everything that we saw in the demos looked great, right? I love the fact that, they say that, there's going to be hybrid options, there's going to be these apps, and it's going to be for all versions of on-prem and 365 and hybrid. They're going to use multiple forms of auth. And I also love the fact that they did their demos on an iPhone. They didn't demo Windows Phone, they didn't demo an Android phone, because they really are trying to be platform agnostic. I think Microsoft has realized that's where people are going. We always are connected, and we're not always able to be tied to our desktop or laptop. We need the ability to get to our SharePoint information on the devices that most people have. Using the Office Graph, keeping search contextual, all of it was great, but my concern is for people who are now maybe on 2010 and just getting ready to move to SharePoint 2013. They're going to be seeing all these new features, and there's always going to be that, well, what do we need to do? Well, you need to move to SharePoint 2016. But where do their customizations go? If you are eventually restricted to the modern pages and, you've built all these web parts, just like we've discussed, where does that leave those users? But in the long run, I love the fact that they're putting all these really rich features in it, because it is going to limit customization. And when you limit customization in SharePoint, it's just easier to maintain. You have better continuity when you're using the out-of-the-box part. So, I mean, I definitely see pros to everything. It's all gorgeous. I can't wait to try it out because I want to put it through its paces and see where it breaks. That's something that I love to do. But I am thinking about users nowadays who it is really going to be a game changer for them. Those people who have gone through such painstaking methods to build, a content roll-up web part on a custom page, and now we've just got a display view template that will do it for them. It's going to be simpler, but how are they going to translate what they already have to these new features? On the other hand, we are going to get feature packs. So there may be people out there who are ready to move to 2016, but they're going to bring their customization with them. And when these feature packs roll out, they're going to be faced with that situation again. So I loved everything that we saw, but I'm always in the back of my mind trying to think about the users who are on 2013 now and who have had to do these really custom web parts to get the sort of displays that they want. Great that they're going to be included, but where does that leave them in that transition phase? I personally can't wait to see the app. I'm really, really excited to check it out. I love the new consistent design across, the app and the web. The SharePoint home web experience, we're just going to have to see how that plays out. Again, I think there's a lot of customization that goes on. I do also like the next generation libraries that they display, the ability to move a document from one site to another. That was another one of my all caps notes. Like, you can move something from your team site to another team site to OneDrive. The other one was being able to link to any kind of document or file within your library for our modern libraries. So there were a lot of really rich features that I saw included for everyday users, which we sometimes don't see. We see a lot of behind the scenes stuff. But they were really focusing on information workers. They specifically mentioned power users, which got a really great, ooh from me when I was watching the broadcast, content types, metadata, just trying to make everything in SharePoint, regardless of what level of user you are, work for you. I just want it moved now, not weeks from now, but we're going to have to wait for that. So all of it, I think, was very much geared towards the regular end user who just needs to come in and consume content, needs to upload a document, needs to move a document, to the power user, to even, the power user who's maybe running a site. They really hit every possible user out there, and that was really great to see, especially with all the wondering that we've had the last few years, is SharePoint even going to be supported? So all of the modern pages, the web apps, it's all geared directly towards the users, and that was great to see. And once it's released, we'll be able to figure out the transition.
That's interesting. You brought up a lot about customizations, and I know Cathy personally has had a lot of insight into what's coming with that. And so, Cathy, what do you have to say about the customizations, and are they limiting customizations with this? Are they making it easier to customize? And what happens to the land of, I want it to look like anything but SharePoint? And the other phrase that I've heard a lot is, well, you don't customize Outlook. Why would you want to customize SharePoint? Which is a little bit crazy because they have different use cases. But Cathy, what do you have to say about that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of chime in on that. And I know we have some development, focus section. I'll go into a little bit more detail about it there. But one of the kind of misconceptions, and I heard it here even, and I just wanted to kind of jump in and clear that up, is that they're not truly limiting customization. So it's just something we need to make sure that people are aware of. What they're actually doing with the introduction of the new SharePoint framework is they're actually opening up customization a lot more into a lot broader audience. In the past, to do customization for SharePoint, you had to be truly a hardcore SharePoint developer. So it's a very small skill set of people that were out there that could develop custom web parts and customizations for the brand and all of this. And what they're truly doing now in the shift that they're making is they're moving this to a more, any web developer can create customizations for SharePoint, and they're separating out the framework, the presentation layer, from the back-end layer. So no longer will we be creating custom master pages where we have to go in and edit and change things around. So it's much like with any other version of SharePoint, when you're looking towards upgrading, your customization upgrade story has always been that we have to adapt our customization when we're looking to upgrade from a previous version to a new. Whether this was back in 2007 with all on-prem, to 2010 where we were looking at Office 365 and 2010 on-premises, to now 2013 with Office 365 and on-premises, and looking forward to 2016. It's always been the same story. You customize the look and feel of SharePoint, you create custom web parts. All of these things have to be reevaluated on every upgrade cycle. And what they're trying to do with the separation and moving forward with the SP framework is to minimize that as we move forward. So right now, if you're developing customization for Office 365, as many of us on the Planet team do, we've developed those for Office 365 when it was SharePoint 2013 backend framework. Now it's SharePoint 2016. So you've already started to see that happening, and now they're just taking it one step further. So they're not truly limiting customizations. They're trying to give us another developer platform on top of the existing ones that we already have to help us make those customizations more seamless as we continue to move through.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I really see Planet being able to assist people with is as you guys start looking at, okay, here's the next thing, where am I going, what am I doing? We're going to be able to sit down with you, look at what you have, and say, hey, here's a path forward, here's options, here's how we take it, and how do we navigate this new feature. And so it's really exciting to see all of these different pieces, but yet understand there's this land of announcements and new features and shiny tools, and then there's this real world that we live in, and how we bridge between the two. So all very, very good information. I'm going to hop into the next piece right now, which is the development update. And, you know, that kind of ties to it. I said I was going to give Patrick a chance to talk when we got to this new section, and I forgot it was the dev section. So this one, I'm going to hop. I think I'm going to start with Mark on this one, and maybe you can give us an update on what were the announcements in the dev space, or as a developer who's looking at the future of SharePoint, what should you be looking at? What should you be thinking about? What are the different pieces that are there?
Well, thank you. Well, I think Cathy kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, the idea, right, is to expand out the current base of developers that can participate in the platform. And, you know, I think the other thing that was commented on just a few moments ago is that it's going to be interesting to see how the reality hits, you know, the promise of what we have ahead of us. And it starts, you know, even at the basic level of information workers using things like Power Apps and flows. You know, obviously, you know, forms and workloads have been around for years, and folks have found ways to use those tools to create sort of customized experience. And we really about a lot of that we do within our group. We're even as we think about apps that we're writing that are custom outside of that, still is around, a forms and workflow type experience, albeit it might be one that's integrated or a lot more custom than what can be provided in InfoPath. And so, you know, we saw the REST APIs make their appearance in SharePoint 2010, and you know, in 2013 there was a new development paradigm that was introduced, and you know, developers that kind of get on board with that. Companies that also had to get on board with that, and you know, I mean, even to this day, we still are running into scenarios where customers are hesitant, you know, to spend, you know, to upgrade those products, but you know, we are seeing it happen, and so with the introduction of sort of a new model, I think in 2016, the most interesting part is going to be, you know, we now have yet another way that we can, you know, potentially offer value to our customers. What's going to be the best way? And I'm excited about the SharePoint framework to see what it offers. I'm a client-side developer myself. I've spent many years writing a lot of projects in HTML and JavaScript and related frameworks, from jQuery to React to Knockout. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of promise there. I would still say that a majority of the projects that we tend to do are very server-side centric. Even if they have a HTML5 and JavaScript front end, they're making REST calls, you know, to say OData endpoints, things like that, that we're writing with, say, MVC API. And so, you know, whether or not we're going to be able to implement everything that we want in client side and realize that as a future, I'm not sure yet. It's too early to say. I think there's still some information outstanding too on how they're planning to handle security with all of the given changes as well. But I'm very optimistic, and I'm very encouraged to see that they are trying to bring others on. One of the things that has been a great paradigm shift with the 2013 app model, and you can see it just evolving, especially if you've also been following the .NET development space, is that Microsoft is reducing the hard dependencies on Visual Studio. And I love Visual Studio, don't get me wrong. Having used many other IDEs, I still always come back to it. But the promise here is you can develop SharePoint 2016 applications without using Visual Studio, and I think that is a low cost barrier to entry for folks, and it's extremely exciting.
I love it. You say that you love Visual Studio or you love all of these things. I still strongly declare that I'm allergic to syntax and semicolons, so it's wonderful, but not my thing. I love it.
I love Planet. Because I got half of the cake, got completely different online, and Mark can speak to all of that stuff, and I'm just going, okay.
I love it. Patrick or Cathy, do you guys have anything to kind of, and thank you, Mark, for your update and your summary and your thoughts on that one. I think it's really good stuff. I think I see Patrick talking, maybe?
At least putting things into my head to talk about. So, yeah, I'm not going to say that I'm one way or the other for the new framework. I just know that if I have something to do within SharePoint, I already have a way to do it. Right? I'm used to the app model, I'm used to working within the app domain, working with the client-side object model. I don't need to learn another framework. If I can't do with what I'm doing now, something's wrong. So if I need to get into it and learn it, I will. But at this point in time, I have no need or desire to learn it.
I think a lot of it's going to change as things come out. I know the SharePoint team in and of itself has gotten a bad rap for new release, new model. So that becomes a fun thing with every year. We're totally learning something different. And so I think it's one of those areas where it's wait and see. And just like you're not going to dive into every new feature just immediately just because it's a new feature, I think this is the same thing. And so you proceed with caution. And I mean, that's the real world approach. You see what it is, you do what makes the most sense. And I'm sure this model is going to work for some organizations and open up a ton of possibilities for them. But just like you said, Patrick, if what you have isn't broken and there's not necessarily a good reason to go over here, why go just to go? And so I think it's one of those areas that a lot more needs to be said about it. I'm really looking towards Microsoft to pushing out more of that information. I know there was a lot of buzz in a 120-minute keynote. I think 3.5 minutes. I think 3.5 minutes was dedicated to dev, and there was no code. I was, of course, thrilled to death about that. However, it was like, okay, wait, you just like dropped this bomb in the middle of it and then went back over here. So I think it's an area to watch. And Mark, I think you have a comment to kind of think about that. I can tell on your face you had something to say, and then we'll pass it over to Cathy to kind of wrap us up.
Oh, I was just going to comment kind of on each point. I think that a lot of developers probably feel the same way, myself included. But I will say that the one thing that they did announce that I thought was kind of exciting was that they're basically consolidating all of the code under a single namespace. So if you're a developer now and you're like, what APIs am I supposed to be using? There's an Office 365 one, there's a SharePoint one, there's the REST APIs, there's the JSON. So which one am I supposed to use? All of this is going to be consolidated under a single API. So I think the details are still outstanding on that, but that was one thing that is exciting for developers.
And I think once we get more details, we can pull together another perspectives panel and get some of our other developers online to talk through as more details get released. We can talk through that and work through that. So Cathy, do you have some thoughts on development before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, something to kind of wrap this up a little bit is that I think it was very strategic what they did of only having a few minutes and not showing code. Unfortunately, the code for the SP framework is still highly evolving. Right now, there's a very small group of people who have seen it, who are working with it, and so that group of people are still constantly making changes. You're starting to see some of them blogging on it and seeing what's coming out from that. People like Waldeck and Victor and some of those out there in the community who are blogging on what they're seeing with the SP framework. It's still in early stages. So a lot of what Microsoft is releasing on this is very strategic as they continue to work towards it. But one thing, if you're kind of new into this or curious, I like to call it dev curious about how this new SP framework is going to work. One thing that you could be brushing up your skills on is JavaScript. It is going to rely heavily upon JavaScript, and so it is opening the market for SharePoint development to a broader base of web developers who are not familiar with the very specific frameworks and components and all of this that SharePoint needed in the past. But let's be looking ahead towards Ignite and what they're going to be releasing and talking about with the SP framework at Ignite. But I think it's still kind of in development here, and we'll still kind of see what happens. But if you're curious about what's going to be happening, start brushing up on your JavaScript, because that's definitely where it's going.
Awesome. We have just a few minutes left, so I am going to move us on to see if we have any audience questions. We haven't had any come in, but I'm going to move us along to that. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, and Patrick, you beginning, I'm going to start with you. As we close out, I'm going to ask everybody to share what is the actionable do this next advice that we could give to the people watching this webinar. If we could tell them, okay, based on all this information that was just dropped to you last week, how do you proceed forward in actually staying up on it, doing with it? What are some actionable next steps? And I will start with Patrick.
From a learning about SharePoint 2016 perspective?
About any perspective, yeah.
Okay. Well, then, the best thing to do, like you said in the beginning, was to go review some of those videos. Go click on all the links of the videos that they didn't show at the last at that conference the other day, right? So just get caught up on the videos and get caught up with where SharePoint's going.
Yeah, and I think Office blogs is really your best spot right now to pay attention to what Microsoft is saying. They put a ton of content out there, as well as user voice. They pay a lot of attention to user voice, so those are two different channels of where you can go. Cathy, what would be your piece of advice?
Oh, wow. For me, it's all about looking towards some of the things that take the most. And some of the things that they're starting to release into the Office 365 environments right away. For me, the biggest one that pops up is the new document library experience, and things updated from a training perspective, and how to determine which features are we going to use when. So there is a way to turn off the new document library experience. So as somebody who does implementations and plans this out, that's what I'd be looking for.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Up next, Mark, what is your piece of advice you'd give to the masses?
Well, I think that I'll just echo some of the statements that others made. I mean, again, on the JavaScript side, if you're a developer, that's really important that you're doing that. TypeScript even so much, because I believe the way they're setting up the tooling is they're going to use TypeScript to compile down the JavaScript. On the infrastructure side, reading the blogs and watching the videos is certainly good. I think doing evaluations, we've been talking with customers who are interested in upgrading to 2016 on-prem and doing evaluations of their environment to see what they have in place, how web parts or solutions that you've developed in the past are going to cut over. Kind of understanding that model is probably important.
Very cool. I love it. How about you, Tanya? What is your piece of advice for the road?
So mine is whatever SharePoint environment you're on, be ready to take a look at those apps once they release them, because the SharePoint apps are going to have a lot of potential to just really increase not just effectiveness, but the ability for your users to get the information where and when they need it. I think we've gotten a lot of indications that Microsoft finally gets SharePoint. It's not going anywhere. They are investing heavily in it. But I think the SharePoint app has the possibility to just really kind of make SharePoint adoption and use just blow up within organizations if they just take a really close look at those apps and see if they can work with them.
I love it. All good things. I'm kind of echoing what other people would say. The one thing I would say is regardless of your environment, whether you're on-prem, whether you're in Office 365, whether you're still back on SharePoint 2007, regardless of what's going on, it is so important that you have an Office 365 trial tenant, whether it's something that you create every 90 days with the free preview or whatever you do, and keep first release on. Because when these features release and they're MVP, you want to get your voice heard. And something that is so clear about Microsoft is that they want to hear what we have to say. And what we have to say is impacting how products are built. And I want to make sure that the right voices are getting heard. So even if you're using on-prem, these features could eventually lead down to on-prem. And so it should be part of your daily, I don't want to say daily, but it should be part of your investment and your R&D within your own company to be attached to some of the things that are going on in Office 365 so that you can have a voice out there. So this has been great, guys. Thank you so much for sitting on the panel. It's been great. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed it just as well. Just in closing out, we have a couple of things. If you guys have enjoyed the session that we did today, the Planet Perspective, I want to let you guys know about a product offering that we have called Evolve 365, which really pulls together the perspective of Planet, the training that we do, the people that we have on the ground, and it pulls it together in a way that allows us to do user adoption and training and preparedness and getting you ready for all of these things coming. And so Tanya is our trusted advisor on that team. Other people have been looped in as we build this out and do this. And so if this has been helpful to you guys, I want to just give you guys an opportunity to check it out. And so we've included some slides on it as well as a free trial. So we're going to kind of close out and say that you guys can check us out here. We'd love to see you guys. It has been a great event, and we hope to see you guys at one of our next webcasts. So thanks everybody so much for coming, and just have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Thanks guys. Bye.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.